Hello, my name is Mohammed Kimji. In book number 13, the battle continues on the same day of battle that began at the opening of book number 11. The Achaeans are pinned against their ships, and there are some Achaeans who are able to mount some kind of offensive. A number of Achaeans are mentioned as having success against Trojan fighters: Idomeneus, Antilochus, Meriones, Menelaus, Aias, and other Achaeans are able to keep the Trojans from lighting the ships on fire. Book number 13 is probably the book in which you find the most detailed descriptions of battle scenes. And we will have occasion in this video to maybe look at a few of these moments. I have mentioned in my analysis of book number 5 that there are common elements to battle scenes in the Iliad. And I may just review those common elements because they do appear many, many times in this particular book. I mentioned that warriors in the Iliad are usually identified through their patrilineal descent. That is, it's the father that provides the seed. And when a warrior is spoken of, often when tracing back his family history, they will trace the family history through the father's line. The mother is really, I'm not going to say irrelevant, but not mentioned unless the mother is a goddess. Um, in which case, as in the case of Achilles, she would be prominent. I mentioned that the spotlight in the Iliad is usually on at least one warrior of high distinction. You won't find in the Iliad vivid descriptions of battle scenes among warriors who have no distinction. They're going to be battles between kings or among kings or with at least one king or lord who is fighting another battle, another enemy soldier. I mentioned that in most cases, it's the warrior who initiates the fight who ends up the loser. It's not, I wouldn't say always the case, but usually it does happen that the one who initiates is the one who ends up losing. I mentioned that often there is a verbal exchange between the enemy fighters, either prior to or during or after the battle. Sometimes this exchange will take the form of mockery. It could take the form of intimidation. It could take the form of one hero or both heroes drawing attention to his own strength, his own family history, his own heroic exploits. When the battle is between two heroes, there is usually a really intensely vivid description of the encounter and of the moment when the weapon that is used impacts the target. It could be a spear, it could be a thrusting spear, it could be an arrow, it could be, we find for the first time, an axe uh, used in book number 13. It could be a sword, a pike. Um, but we find a really vivid description of the moment when the weapon used penetrates the armor or penetrates the flesh. And sometimes we'll have a really vivid description of the shield that is penetrated, how many layers that shield has, or whether it has oxhide on the front or things like that. Um, and when you do have a description about the moment of impact of a weapon against the skin, then you will have a really vivid description of the impact that has on the body. Maybe the head cracks, or um, the head severs from the body, or the head is cut in half. The bones will shatter, the teeth will shatter, um, the arm will sever from the body, or the intestines will come out. But a really vivid description of the moment of impact, and it's usually very gruesome. I mentioned that after a soldier falls, sometimes details are given about his past and about his life. I also mentioned that if the fallen soldier is a man of high distinction, sometimes even when the soldier, the lineage is not exactly known, the one who is victorious will try to take the armor from the body, and the um, soldiers who are allies of the one who has fallen, they will try to keep the victor from taking the spoils of the soldier. We saw in book number 10 that in the night raid of the Achaeans managed to capture the horses of a great king on the enemy side. And sometimes this will happen. I mentioned also that mockery is very common. Mockery, taunting, flaunting, glorying over the one's victory over the fallen soldier. Even when the soldier is dead, the victor might mock the soldier. And this is not to eliminate the threat, because there is no threat anymore from the one who has fallen, but still we find that happening. I also mentioned that the victor might attempt to drag the corpse of the soldier away to his camp to desecrate the corpse. Maybe we will see later in the Iliad that the victor might want to stab the corpse, or decapitate the corpse, or simply leave the corpse for the animals to devour. If enemy soldiers are nearby or able, they're going to resist the soldier who wants to drag the corpse away. And sometimes people will die in the process of trying to keep the corpse of the ally, compatriot, on their side, and not let the corpse be dragged away. Lastly, in many cases, the encounter, the battle, or the outcome of the battle will be described in terms of analogies from nature. The skies, the rushing water, the predatory animal like the wild boar, which is quite a common simile that is used, the lion, the wolf. You might have analogies of stars or falling trees. There are a number of different moments in book number 13 where the fallen soldier, as he makes impact, the soldier, as he falls, as he makes impact on the ground, will crash like a tall poplar tree that falls. And usually the similes that are used are in the form of a nature analogy. And we find that just reproduced over and over and over again in different ways in the Iliad. So let's look at book number 13 in some more detail. So at this point, Zeus actually relaxes his attention and he turns his gaze to the north. This would be the areas that you and I today would call Ukraine or Russia or Bulgaria, places in that region. And we are told at line number 7 onwards, again, I'm always using the Lattimore translation of the Iliad in my discussion of the different books. He, Zeus, did not at all now turn his shining eyes upon Troyland, for he had no idea in mind that any one of the immortals would come down to stand by either Danaans or Trojans. Now, we know that in book number 8, Zeus had forbidden the gods to interfere with in the battle, either on the Achaian side or on the Trojan side, and he had intimidated the gods by speaking about how much stronger he was than they were, than all of them combined. Um, and he inspired fear in them. And most of the gods we will see are obeying that order. But when Poseidon sees that Zeus is not focused on what's going on the battlefield, very distracted, Poseidon will intervene and he is going to give strength to the Achaean army. So at line number 10, we read, neither did the powerful shaker of the earth, this is Poseidon, keep blind watch, for he sat and admired the fighting and the run of the battle aloft on top of the highest summit of timbered Samos, the Thracian place. Now, Samos is actually an island to the south, but when we are told that this is the Thracian place, this is referring to the region to the north, not to the island of the south. And the mountain is more than 5,200 feet, and Poseidon is at the top. Now, I mentioned in previous videos that the gods are really described in ways that one would describe human beings. They reflect human beings. When human beings thought about the gods, they thought about the gods in terms of their own lives, as having bodies, in terms of being fast, in terms of being strong, and so on. But while qualitatively, the way the gods are described mirrors the human being, quantitatively, they are always greater. They are faster, they are stronger, they are taller, they are bigger, their strides are longer. And we see that happening in book number 13 very early, when we are told at line number 20 that Poseidon took 3 long strides forward, and in the 4th he came to his goal, where his glorious house was built in the water's depth, glittering with gold, imperishable forever. So from the top of the mountain, more than 5,200 feet, he gets to the bottom of the sea in 4 strides. That's a typical example of how Poseidon is striding like the human being, but it's just a longer stride. And this is how the ancient Greeks depicted in their poetry the power of the gods. And of course, Poseidon's house is glittering with gold. So we have, the gods being having a place with a lot of riches. And I mentioned in my discussion in the Bible, about the Bible, how, in the Bible, you never find the idea of God as being associated with riches, as being associated with materialism, as being associated with possessions, as having finer possessions, or as having finer clothing, or things like that. And so there's, it's just an unbelievable severance in the values in the Bible and the values in ancient Greek literature. In ancient Greek literature, what makes one stronger and more powerful and one of high distinction is, in part, the possessions that one has. And so Poseidon is described as having a glorious house glittering with gold. Going there, he harnessed under his chariot, this is line number 23 onwards, Going there, he harnessed under his chariot his bronze-shod horses, flying-footed, with long manes streaming of gold. And he put on clothing of gold about his own body, and he took up the golden lash, carefully compacted, and climbed up into his chariot. The horses of the god the manes are streaming with gold. Not sure if this refers to the color or if this has to do with actual gold. Um, Poseidon puts on clothing of gold, and he took up the golden lash. Um, Quite typical and really quite important to see how in the Bible these things don't matter at all. What counts is spiritual or moral life and the action, not the relative value of the things one has. Poseidon then goes to the ships of the Achaeans. At line number 39, but the Trojans gathered into a pack like flame, like a storm cloud, came on after Hector, the son of Priam, raging, relentless, roaring and crying as one. And their hope ran high of capturing the ships of the Achaeans and killing the best men beside them. All of them. But Poseidon, who circles the earth and shakes it, rose up out of the deep water to stir on the Argives, likening himself in form and weariless voice to Calchas. Let's stop there for a second. So, three successive similes to describe the Trojans like a pack. One can think of a pack of wolves or a pack of wild dogs. Then, like flame, we've seen how wildfire is often used to describe the uncontrollability or unstoppability of either the Achaeans or the Trojans. And like a storm cloud. So all of them are nature analogies, as again is very typical. We see that Hector wants to capture the ships of the Achaeans, burn them, and then ultimately kill the Achaeans. All of them, we are told, at line number 43. Completely wipe them out. This is what the Achaeans seem to want to do to the Trojans. In book number, what was it? 4, I think. Agamemnon told Menelaus that even the young man-child inside the woman's belly, even he must be killed. Poseidon speaks to the Aiantes. We know that Aias, son of Oileus, is the lesser Aias. Aias, son of Telamon, is the greater Aias. And he speaks about Hector as going berserk, flame-like. This is at line number 53. And he tells the Aiantes to stand fast and to urge the rest to stand fast also. It seems that there is really not much separating at this point the Trojans from the ships. While Aias, son of Oileus, he recognizes that this one who appears to him as Calchas isn't really Calchas, it must be Poseidon. And he tells the greater Aias that this is actually this is not the seer. At line number 83, the earth encircler stirred up the Achaeans behind them. Who is the earth encircler? The earth encircler is Poseidon. Why would Poseidon be called the earth encircler? Because in the ancient world, the cosmology was that the earth was more or less like a flat disk, and circling the earth was the river, and the river was called ocean. And so the earth encircler is the waters, consistent with ancient cosmology. The earth encircler stirred up the Achaeans behind them, who were cooling the heat of the inward heart back beside their vessels. But their very limbs were broken with weariness of hard work, and also discouragement of the heart came over them as they watched the Trojans, and how in a mass they had overswarmed the great wall. As they saw them, the tears dripped from their eyes, and did not think they could win clear of the evil. But the earth shaker, lightly turning their battalions to strength, drove them onward. First came encouragement to Teucrus, and also to the other Achaeans who are with Teucrus. And he says to the Achaeans, Poseidon says at line number 111, even though it be utterly true that the son of Atreus, the hero, wide, powerful Agamemnon, is guilty because he did dishonor to Peleus' son, the swift-footed, still there is no way for us now to hang back from the fighting. Now, I want to make a comment about this. It will be clear to you by now, if you've been following the videos that I've been creating, that Agamemnon is guilty from the point of view of those who disagree with him. But Agamemnon, in taking Briseis from Achilles and in dishonoring Achilles, has acted on the basis of exactly the same values that all of the Greeks act from or by. Each Achaean is concerned with his own honor. And Agamemnon's form of compensation was the war prize of an elite member of the army, Achilles. Achilles' form of compensation is death to the Achaean army. But each man desires to protect his honor, and that can happen only at the expense of the honor of another man of high distinction. So Agamemnon is not guilty if by guilty is meant some kind of wrongdoing that conforms to a universal standard. Right and wrong are simply relative to each observer. And so now the Achaeans are in a desperate situation. Poseidon, in the Lattimore translation, speaks of him as guilty because he did not give honor to Achilles. But that just means that Agamemnon has, in taking Briseis from Achilles, caused, you can say, Achilles to respond in a way that has done damage to the Achaeans. But there is no moral guilt here. The guilt refers to the evil consequences, you can say, that has befallen the Achaeans. But again, evil is not a concept of moral evil. So it's a concept of being in a dangerous situation. So the Achaeans are stirred up by Poseidon, and they form a kind of wall to defend the ships. And it describes a phalanx. It describes the wall where the arms are, the bodies literally are united in such a way or interlocked in such a way that to pass through one, you have to compromise the whole wall. You have to pass through the whole wall. Because each man's strength is tied to the strength of the one who is interlocked beside him. This is how this is described. At line number 130 onwards. Locking spear by spear, shield against shield at the base. So buckler leaned on buckler. Buckler is a small shield. Helmet on helmet, man against man, and the horsehair crusts along the horns of their shining helmets touched as they bent their heads, so dense were they formed on each other. the Trojans attack. At line number 136, the Trojans came down on them in a pack, and Hector led them raging straight forward, like a great rolling stone from a rock face that a river swollen with winter rain has wrenched from its socket, and with immense washing broken the hold of the unwilling rock face. The springing boulder flies on, and the forest thunders beneath it, and the stone runs unwavering on a strong course till it reaches the flat land, then rolls no longer for all its onrush. So Hector for a while threatened lightly to break through the shelters and ships of the Achaeans and reach the water, cutting his way. But when he collided with the dense battalions, he was stopped, hard, beaten in on himself. Now Hector has been represented in terms of the analogy of a very powerful boulder that is being dislodged from a hill and that is simply bounding down. You don't get the sense that there is any way to control the power that Hector brings. It is like an unstoppable force. But the phalanx of the Achaeans does stop this boulder and bring it to a stop. But what I don't know, it's so remarkable. It's always remarkable to me that the great heroes in the Iliad are always described in terms of natural analogies. They are often described in terms of natural analogies, and these natural analogies are expressing brute force, power, natural power. They don't express any kind of moral consciousness at all, because there is no moral consciousness as you and I understand moral consciousness in the Iliad. It simply does not exist. So what you find when you see these natural analogies is a kind of thinking that you have access to that is completely and utterly unlike our own. These natural analogies are a kind of microscope that we have into ancient Greek thought. Why are these heroes represented as heroes? What does it say about the people who represent them as heroes, who understand them as heroes? And what does it mean that they are models for how to live and what choices to make and what counts, what matters? It's a statement about the people who understand this poem as a poem about heroes, about the models that they should aspire to be. Well, Hector comes to a stop when he collides with the dense battalions, the sons of the Achaeans against him, stabbing at him with swords and leaf-headed spears, thrust him away from them. So they gave ground backward, staggering. Hector lifted his voice and called in a piercing cry to the Trojans to stand with him. Now, the battle continues to rage on with the Achaeans and the Trojans, both killing and being killed. Teucros, the Achaean archer, half-brother, I believe, to Aias, son of Telamon, he kills Imbrios at line number 170. And we see this is a scene which will lead to Imbrios's decapitation. That happens at line number 203, where the head is hewed from the soft neck, and it was sent spinning like a ball through the throngs of fighters until it came to rest in the dust at the feet of Hector. Meriones speaks to Idomeneus. Idomeneus is the king of the Cretans, and Meriones is a young Achaean soldier. And Meriones tells Idomeneus that he's left a spear, that he needs to go fetch a spear. And Idomeneus tells him that, if he wants 20 spears, he'll find it in his shelter. A reason I mention this is because, well, let's look at the lines. Idomeneus tells Meriones at line number 260, "You will find 1 spear and 20 spears if you want them, standing against the shining inward wall in my shelter. Trojan spears I win from men that I kill. For my way is not to fight my battles standing far away from my enemies. Thereby I have spears there, and shields massive in the middle, and helms and corselets are there in all the pride of their shining." Here you learn that when armor is stripped from the enemy soldier, that armor is reused. And here it's very clear that Idomeneus has armor that has been taken from fallen soldiers. It's also clear that from the Greek standpoint, generally, it's braver to fight in close combat than it is to fight at a distance. And that's why Idomeneus says to Meriones, "My way is not to fight my battle standing far away from my enemies." Well, Meriones replies that, "For me also, beside my shelter and beside my black ship, there are many spoils of the Trojans, but not near for me to get them." So again, you get the confirmation that spoils are reused, armor is reused. Idomeneus says to Meriones at 278 onwards, "The man who is a coward and the brave man show themselves clearly. The skin of the coward changes color one way and another, and the heart inside him has no control to make him sit steady, but he shifts his weight from one foot to another, then settles firmly on both feet. And the heart inside his chest pounds violent as he thinks of the death spirits, and his teeth chatter together. But the brave man's skin will not change color, nor is he too much frightened once he has taken his place in the hidden position." It's striking to me when I think about my life, what distinguishes between a cowardly response and a heroic response, a brave response, right? What distinguishes between a coward and a brave man? And it's very clear to me that it can be cowardly to fight. It's much braver not to fight. It's much braver to restrain yourself and not to give in to your natural retaliatory impulses. There is nothing cowardly about being afraid when one is in danger. There's nothing cowardly about trying to preserve your life in the face of one who wants to take it, or in the face of being in a situation where it is possible that one wants to take it. So it's striking to me when I read a passage like this, because as common as it is in the Iliad to think of the brave man as the one who bounds into a lethal situation like a boulder that's being dislodged from a mountaintop uncontrollably. It's completely foreign to how I think of my life. And it's completely foreign in the Bible to think of cowardice and bravery in this way. The brave one in my life is the one who stands up for the truth and will defend the truth in spite of danger, not one who is not afraid. It doesn't matter if one is afraid or not afraid. What matters is where one's commitment is. So it's striking, always it's striking to me to read passages which seem to be completely foreign to me, but which are perfectly representative of the values that we find in the text. And so continuing, Idomeneus says to Meriones, even were you to be wounded in your work with spear cast or spear stroke, the weapon would not strike behind your neck nor in your back, but would be driven straight against the chest or the belly as you made your way onward through the meeting of champions. Which means that, I mean, Meriones here is complimented by Idomeneus that, you know, if you were to be struck, you would always be struck behind your neck. You'd always be, you would never be struck behind your neck or in your back, meaning that you would never be running. You would not be a coward. You are a brave fighter. You would be struck in the chest or in the belly, right? You'd always be facing your opponent. Meriones speaks to Idomeneus at 306, 307 onwards. Where are you minded to enter the battle? Would it be on the right of the whole array, or in the center, or to the left? Since I think that nowhere else in the fighting are the flowing-haired Achaeans overmatched so badly. It seems like the Achaean fighters are holding their ground in the center, but on the left side of the fleet, they are vulnerable. And Idomeneus confirms this, that it's the left that that they need to go. So they head out to the left side of the fleet. And an indiscriminate fight, this is at 333, and an indiscriminate fight rose up by the sterns of the vessels. So the sterns of the vessel, this must mean that the ships are pointed with the prows, the front, facing the sea. The sterns are backed up on the beach. An indiscriminate fight rose up by the sterns of the vessels, and as when, under the screaming winds, the whirl storms bluster, the whirl storms bluster on that day when the dust lies deepest along the pathways, and the winds in the confusion of dust uplift a great cloud, such was their indiscriminate battle, and their hearts were furious to slaughter each other. What does indiscriminate fighting mean? What does it mean that they are fighting the way dust is whipped up by a whirlstorm? What is communicated about this scene? Indiscriminate means that there's no discrimination in who, I guess in this case, one is fighting, one is killing. If this is the enemy, it doesn't matter whether or not there is any um, personal connection with the enemy, whether or not the enemy has done anything to me. It's indiscriminate. Whoever is the enemy, you want to slaughter. It's a very, uh, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know, mob-like mentality, but of course, when we use the word mob-like mentality, we're communicating that people are not acting with reason. They're not acting as they should act. They're blindly following um, without thinking. They're thinking as one pack. There's no individual self-criticism or criticism of another. But that would be a moral judgment if I was to say that people are acting like the mob. But here, there is no moral judgment. I have to keep on coming back to this idea. It's a description that is completely void of any moral judgment. To fight indiscriminately is really, with like a whirlstorm of dust, is to express the violence and the chaos and the tumult that that you find at this moment. At line number 345 onwards, two powerful sons of Kronos, this is Zeus and Poseidon, two powerful sons of Kronos, hearts divided against each other, were wreaking bitter agonies on the fighting warriors. Since Zeus willed the victory for the Trojans and Hector, glorifying swift-footed Achilles, yet not utterly did he wish the Achaean people to be destroyed before Iliad, but only was giving glory to Thetis and her strong-spirited son, while Poseidon, emerging unseen from the gray salt water, went among the Argives and stirred them, since he was angered that they were beaten by the Trojans, and blamed Zeus for it bitterly. A number of things are important here. One is that the gods are divided. This is a point I have made again and again and again. If the gods are the masters of human beings and the gods are divided, what does that say about the life of human beings? How can conflict ever come to an end? And if the gods are immortal, how can the conflict ever come to an end? Is it not the case that because the gods each strives for his or her honor at the expense of the gods who want honor for themselves, and if this fight is among gods who are immortal, how can that conflict ever end in human life? Must not the conflict itself be immortal? Is not immortal conflict embedded in the very values that are central to ancient Greek life? Now, we know that Zeus gives glory to Hector to honor Achilles, but you will see what happens, that the honor that Zeus is giving to Hector will be taken away. In fact, he is giving honor to Hector in order to take it away. It will be short-lived. We have already been told that Hector will have the glory until the sun goes down. Book 18, line 241. So there is an impending reversal that is anticipated at this point. He doesn't want all the Achaeans to die. Zeus doesn't want all the Achaeans to die. Well, of course, if all the Achaeans die, then how can Achilles ever have the honor that he wants. How can Agamemnon recognize his madness, that he did no honor to the Achaeans? How can the Achaeans supplicate Achilles if, in fact, all the Achaeans have perished? So Poseidon is on the side of the Achaeans. He is angry with Zeus for giving glory to the Trojans. So these two had looped over both sides a crossing cable of strong discord, and the closing of battle not to be slipped, not to be broken, which unstrung the knees of many. So what is being communicated here? That the gods have bound the Achaeans and the Trojans a crossing cable of strong discord, which could not be slipped or broken. It's almost like the Achaeans and the Trojans are in a straitjacket and they can't break free from this. It's a fascinating image. Oh, the battle continues to rage on by the Achaean vessels. At line number 427 onwards, there was a man, the hero Alcithoas, who was son-in-law of Anchises and had married the eldest of his daughters, Hippodamia. That means, I guess, that he is the brother-in-law of Aeneas, because Aeneas is the son of Anchises. But now Poseidon beat him. This is at line number 434 onwards. But now Poseidon beat him down at the hands of Idomeneus. For he bewitched his shining eyes, made moveless his bright limbs, so that he could not run backward, neither evade him, but stood like a statue or a tree, with leaves towering motionless, while fighting Idomeneus stabbed at the middle of his chest with the spear and broke the bronze armor about him, which in time before had guarded his body from destruction. So here we have a description of how Poseidon intervenes in the battle by paralyzing, literally paralyzing this man, Alcithoas, such that he simply cannot move, but is paralyzed, standing like a statue. Aeneas now goes for Idomeneus at line number 468 onwards. And at 470, yet no fear gripped Idomeneus, as if he were a stripling. But he stood his ground like a mountain wild boar, who in the confidence of his strength stands up to a great rabble of men, advancing upon him in some deserted place, and bristles his back up, and both his eyes are shining with fire. He grinds his teeth in his fury to fight off the dogs and the men. So spear-famed Idomeneus held his ground and would not give way to Aeneas coming against him, but bellowed to his companions. The ancient Greeks must have had very, very close encounters with these wild animals that they are describing. And it would have resonated with them that Idomeneus is standing like a mountain wild boar in ways maybe that, well, for sure, that it doesn't for us, most of us city dwellers. And Idomeneus calls for help at line number 481. This way, friends, stand by me. I'm alone. And terribly I fear the attack of swift-footed Aeneas advancing upon me. And Aeneas also calls down to his companions, and both try to tear at each other. Neither is successful. Deiphobos is a son of Priam. And at line number 518, he kills a son of Ares, the war god. At line number 518 onwards, he struck down with a spear the war god's son, Ascalaphos. So the powerful spear was driven through his shoulder, and he, dropping in the dust, clawed the ground in his finger. It's not an uncommon image. But Ares the huge and bellowing had yet heard nothing of how his son had fallen there in the strong encounter. But he, sheltered under the golden clouds on Mount Olympus, was sitting, held fast by the command of Zeus, where the rest also of the immortal gods were sitting still, in restraint from the battle. That is the moment where you see that the gods are obeying the order of Zeus given in book number 8 at the opening, at the council meeting, where he threatened them not to interfere in the battle, either on the Achaean side or the Trojan side. Antilochus, he is the son of Nestor. At line number 545, Antilochus, watching Thoon, who's a Trojan, as he turned about, dashed in on him and slashed at him, and shore away the entire vein which runs all the way up the back, till it reaches the neck. Now, how is it that the ancient Greeks have this kind of knowledge of physiology or of the human anatomy? My guess is it's because of war. It's because they saw what was inside the bodies firsthand, either of their own fallen men or of the enemy soldiers, because the ancient Greeks were often at war. Meriones, the young soldier, Achaean soldier, he throws a spear, and at line number 368, he strikes a Trojan whose name is Adamas, and struck him between the navel and genitals, where beyond all places death in battle comes painfully to pitiful mortals. Well, maybe that was also firsthand experience. I wouldn't know. There the spear stuck fast, driven, and he, writhing about it, gasped as an ox does when among the mountains the herdsmen have bound him strongly in twisted ropes and drag him unwilling. So he, stricken, gasped for a little while, but not long, until fighting Meriones came close and wrenched the spear out from his body, and a mist of darkness closed over both eyes. The scene shifts now to Helenus, another son of Priam. Helenus is the seer who advised Hector in book number 6 to go back into the city and tell his mother to make an offering to Athena in the temple. And Hector obeyed at that time. Here, Helenus strikes Menelaus. At line number 586, the son of Priam hit him, Menelaus, then on the chest with an arrow in the hollow of his corselet, but the bitter arrow sprang far back, as along a great threshing floor from the broad blade of a shovel. The black-skinned beans and the chickpeas bounce high under the whistling blast and the sweep of the winnowing fan. So back from the corselet of glorious Menelaus, the bitter arrow rebounded far away, being driven hard back. Just incredible. So Menelaus has been struck by an arrow, and the arrow rebounds off the corselet, which is the part of the body armor which protects the vital organs. at the front. And it bounces back. And the poet describes this bouncing back as the way beans or chickpeas bounce back when they are thrown from a shovel under the whistling of a winnowing fan, and the winnowing fan is meant to separate the chaff from the good stuff from the bad stuff, the grain from the, in this case, the bean from the husk and things like that. So as you imagine the the beans being thrown into the air, that that's how the arrow is described as bouncing back from the corselet. And there's no one that I know of that I can imagine in today's world that would describe an arrow that hits a soldier on the armor, uh, but doesn't penetrate, but is um, rebounds backward as being like beans that are thrown from a shovel. That's really strange to me. But that's because I'm bringing to the text values that are completely and utterly different from the text. I see a human being as being struck by an arrow that doesn't penetrate the armor, that's very serious. I don't get the sense that there is anything at stake here. This is a vivid descriptive imagery, but where is the humanity? That's what I always ask. But Atreus' son Menelaus of the great war cry struck him in the hand, where he held the polished bow, and the bronze spear was driven clean on through the bow and the hand beyond it. To avoid death, he shrank into the host of his own companions. Line number 610 onwards. Drawing his sword with the silver nails, the son of Atreus sprang at Pysandros, who underneath the shield's cover gripped his beautiful axe. This is the moment where you have an axe being used. I don't think I've seen this in the Iliad before until now. With strong bronze blade upon a long polished axe, handle of olive wood. They made their strokes at the same time, and Pysandros, with his axe, chopped at the horn of the helmet of Menelaus, crusted with horsehair at the very peak. Menelaus struck him as he came onward in the forehead, over the base of the nose, and smashed his bones, so that both eyes dropped bloody and lay in the dust at his feet before him. He fell curling, and Menelaus, setting his heel on his chest, stripped off his armor and spoke, exulting over him. So I think that you leave the ships of the fast-mounted Danaans, you haughty Trojans, never to be glutted with the grim war noises. I'm jumping a bit. Wretched dogs, and your hearts knew no fear at all the hard anger of Zeus, loud thundering, the guest's god, who someday will utterly sack your steep city, you who in vanity went away, taking with you my wedded wife and many possessions. What does it mean when Menelaus refers to Zeus as the guest's god, the god that's going to ultimately lead the Achaeans to sack Troy? Well, Zeus is the god of guests, which means that Zeus is represented in ancient Greek literature as being responsible for overseeing the guest-host relationship. There are certain protocols that a guest needs to follow. when he meets a host. And there are certain hosts, there are certain protocols that a host needs to follow when he takes in a guest. And Paris, who came to Sparta and took Helen from Menelaus's palace, he violated the protocols and thus the guest-host relationship. And what Menelaus is saying is that Zeus is going to make the Trojans pay for this. The god of guests is going to make the Trojans pay for what Paris did. Now, some of you might be wondering, how the heck are the Achaeans and the Trojans to communicate with one another if, in fact, the Trojans speak a completely different language? And we know that they do because they are represented, they are said to be speaking different language and many different languages within the Trojan forces, whereas the Greeks speak one language. Well, this, is the I don't even know how to express it. The poet doesn't account for it. The poet doesn't think that he needs to account for it. The poet doesn't raise any questions about it. Because again, the poet is a mouthpiece for the god or gods who give him the song. So there is no critical standpoint that we can expect that can satisfy the critical questions that we bring to the text. Did Troy happen? Literally? Was there, is this a historical record? Of course not. There's nothing in history where there was a war and the gods are flying around and, you're not going to have, there's no journalists at whatever wars they did have who are writing down each and every word that each and every person said. And where in the thick of battle, where there are spears and arrows and missiles that are covering the sky like snowflakes in a snowstorm cover the sky, where two heroes are talking to each other, and each hero lets the other person finish, 20 lines, and then the hero that the other hero then speaks, and then the other hero doesn't interrupt him, and all these things. So of course this is not a historical record. Was there a war around the region of Troy? Archaeological evidence suggests that yes, there was a war around the region of Troy, but that doesn't mean that what we read in the Iliad is a historical account at all, or it doesn't, or that the war that actually happened, that archaeology suggests has happened in the past, that it was over, a girl that was taken, but we don't know any of that. So Menelaus, well, I'm going to skip that part. I'm going to jump to, let's go to line number 650. This is the point where the young Achaean soldier Meriones shoots an arrow at Harpalion, who is an ally of the Trojans. At line number 650, Meriones let fly at him at Harpalion a bronze-shod arrow and hit him beside the right buttock, so that the arrow was driven on through under the bone to fix in the bladder. There, sitting among the arms of his beloved companions, he gasped out his life, then lay like a worm extended along the ground. A dead body, the body of a soldier who has fallen, is described as being hit by an arrow that pierces the bladder, penetrates the bladder. And then he's described as falling to the ground, like a worm, or laying like a worm. What is this communicating to you? The simple description, what is it communicating to you about human life? I know that the description of maybe the positioning of the body is curved, or, I mean, I don't know, like a worm is not straight. But what's the significance of that description? The poet here is describing the contours of the body. But what are the values of the poet who uses these words? There is no one that you or I know who would describe a person who has been killed in this way. I keep beating the same drum over and over and over again. What is this story communicating to you about the meaning of human life as found in this poem? So they fought on. This is at line number 673. So they fought on in the likeness of blazing fire. But meanwhile, Hector, beloved of Zeus, had not yet heard of this, and knew nothing of how to the left of the ships his people were being slaughtered by the Argives. Zeus is represented as being the king of the gods. There are times where Zeus is represented as being what you and I would call omniscient. There are times where Zeus is represented as having awareness of everything that is going on. And then there are times where Zeus is represented as being distracted. He has no knowledge of what's happening. People are going, other gods are going behind his back and doing things. And you see here that the hierarchy of the gods, which positions Zeus at the top, is not a stable hierarchy. Here, Zeus is being undermined by Poseidon, who is stirring the Achaeans. And Zeus has no knowledge of this. There are many times where Zeus is represented as being deceived. So the claim that Zeus is the king of the gods, it doesn't express a condition that is stable. The gods are constantly, as I've mentioned many times, in their own war, struggling for the very same thing that human beings struggle for: honor, power. And in that struggle, the hierarchies keep moving, just as in human life. In that sense, too, the world of the gods mirrors the world of human beings. We have an image at about line number 701 onwards, where the two Iases are fighting together like two oxen that are yoked together, or at least they're fighting together with an inseparability as two oxen that are yoked together. 701, swift Aias, the son of Oileus, would not at all now take his stand apart from Telamonian Aias, who is the greater of the two fighters, not even a little, but even as two wine-colored oxen straining with even force drag the compacted plow through the fallow land, and for both of them, at the base of the horns, the dense sweat gushes. Only the width of the polished yoke keeps a space between them as they toil down the furrow till the share cuts the edge of the plowland. So these took their stand in battle close to each other. Polydamas sees that the Trojans at this point are facing intense resistance. Polydamas is the seer of the Trojan army, and we know that he had counseled Hector to withdraw, and Hector did not like that counsel. Here, Polydamas tells Hector at line number 740 onwards, draw back now and call to this place all of our bravest, and then we might work out together our general counsel, whether we can fall upon their bent ships, if the god might be willing to give such power to us, or whether thereafter we can win away from the ships unhurt. Since I fear the Achaeans might wreak on us requital for yesterday, since beside their ships lurks a man insatiate of fighting, and I think we can no longer utterly hold him from the fighting. So spoke Polydamas, and this counsel of safety pleased Hector. Now, what is yesterday? Well, the sun rose at the beginning of book 11. During the night, the embassy was sent to Achilles. That's in book number 9. Yesterday would have to have been book 8, when the Trojans they mounted a very, very strong offensive. And book number 8 ended with the Trojans camped out beyond the ditch of the Achaeans, 50,000 of them, 50 to each watchfire, and there were 1,000 watchfires. Well, Hector agrees. He tells Polydamas, do you rather call back to their place all of our bravest? I'm going over there to meet the attack, and afterward I will come back soon. And he does. Actually, he meets Paris, and he scolds Paris. In much the same language, at least, that he used as in book number 3, when Paris shrunk from battle. Here he says, evil Paris, beautiful woman crazy, cajoling. Now all steep Ilion is lost utterly. Now your own headlong destruction is certain. Who knows if he's just trying to egg him on or what, but it doesn't seem like the Trojans are in a bad situation at this time at all. We know that Hector meets Aias. But there is no serious engagement at that point. Well, while there is intense resistance at the left of the Achaean fleet, we get the sense at this point that still the Trojans are just very, very, very close to breaking through what appears to be this last layer of Achaean resistance. And we will see very soon the Trojans will break through this last layer, and they will start to burn the Achaian ships. My name is Mohammed Kimji. If you would like to contact me, you can do so on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for your time.